Is it a stage name? Is it a nickname? Is it a microaggression? Is it not that big of a deal? How about multiple things can be true at once? Let's talk about Shaboozey. More specifically, let's talk about Shaboozey's name. Aloha, beautiful humans. Welcome to my channel. If you are new here, welcome back if we've been locked in. My name is Sasha, and today I want to talk about Shaboozey's nickname, Shaboozey's stage name more specifically, and how it can be something that is viewed as benign because, you know, what is in a name? However, as a first generation child of immigrants, there is a layer to giving somebody nicknames and shortening people's names that I just want to talk about because it is absolutely a microaggression. And I've had this conversation on TikTok. However, it's really challenging sometimes to have nuanced, multi-layered, multi-dimensional conversations on TikTok and social media in general because people have diminished attention spans. Then you have people who struggle with listening and reading comprehension. Then you have people who listen or read to respond, not to understand. What I like about having these conversations on YouTube, and I think I'm going to have more of these conversations on YouTube because I really like you're able to provide more context to what you're saying, and you don't really feel that pressure to condense your video into a minute or 3 minutes at most in hopes of trying to get your point across succinctly to people who are probably not going to watch past the 15-second mark. The CMAs, Country Music Awards, happened last week, and there was a lot of controversy surrounding the fact that Shaboozey was snubbed. This is a really big deal because Shaboozey has been the top performing country artist, like a breakout star. Bar song Tipsy has been topping the country charts, the Billboard charts. I think it's going on. It is probably one of the longer charting songs on the Billboard. Shaboozey's bar song Tipsy just tied the record for the most weeks at #1, and the song holds the distinction only alongside of Lil Nas X's Old Town Road for topping Billboard's Hot 100 chart for 19 weeks. So Shaboozey is doing his big one. He's worked with Beyonce, like he's just been a breakout star. And so at the CMAs, a lot of people thought he was going to clean up, and he largely ended up being snubbed. In light of him being snubbed, a lot of people took it as an opportunity to laugh at him, to make fun of him, and added as further fuel to the Diaspora wars, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But as a first generation Nigerian American, I'm so tired of the Diaspora wars. It is, at the end of the day, we are not each other's enemies. We should not be fighting against one another. Before anybody is racist or discriminatory or prejudiced against me, they're not going to stop to ask me, are your parents immigrants? Are you a first generation kid? Are you Black American? Are you Nigerian American? They're not going to stop and ask me that. At the end of the day, the culprit, the #1 enemy is white supremacy. It is racism. So we should be banding together and unifying together as a people because we are all Black. Yes, there are different cultures and ethnicities and countries of origin behind our Blackness. We are all part of the diaspora. We all have our own rich and cultural history, but we all share a commonality that we are Black first. And so when it comes to the Diaspora wars, it just really frustrates me and irritates me. While we may have different cultures, countries, and ethnicities of origin, we are still Black, and we are all fighting the same battle against white supremacy. So it was really frustrating for me to see people take this as an opportunity to kind of put down Shaboozey and act as if, oh, you got what you deserve. There was a creator who was also Nigerian. He was like kind of poking fun at Shaboozey, like they named you Chibueze and you let them call you Shaboozey. Until you rectify that, until you change your name, you will continue to lose. And you know, I understood what he was trying to say. But from the context of Shaboozey's name, I always found it very interesting. And when I learned the story behind it, it kind of gave me the side eye. While I understand that creator who was flaming him about his stage name and saying you let them call you Shaboozey when your name is Chibueze, I understood why he was flaming him. But there were a lot of people who seemed really unclear as to what he was talking about. Like they didn't see an issue with Shaboozey's name and why Shaboozey's stage name is an issue. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, because there are so many there are so many ways you could look at this, right? You could look at it from the perspective of, oh, it's just a nickname, oh, it's just a stage name, and both of those things can be true, but it is also a microaggression. Shaboozey's name is Collins Obinna Chibueze. It is an Igbo name, and if it's one thing about Igbos, if it's about one thing about Nigerians, period, they're gonna give you some powerful names. Chibueze means God is king. He's already coming through with like powerful last name. I love it. Like, Nigerian names are so beautiful. And I'm not just saying this because I'm biased, but Nigerian names are beautiful. And like 90% of them have something to do with God. Like, that's just very much a Nigerian name. God is going to be there somewhere, some type of wealth, some type of beauty, some type of glory. Like, love Nigerian names. And I know I'm a little biased, but whatever. Anyway, Shaboozey grew up in Woodbridge, Virginia. Shout out to the DMV. And he basically said he got Shaboozey because a lot of his friends and people in his community, his teachers, just the people around him could not pronounce Shaboozey, and out of it came the name Shaboozey. Now, I don't know how people get Shaboozey from Chibueze because it's not that hard to pronounce. I'm not saying this just because I am Nigerian. It's literally Chibueze. Like, it's right there. But anyways, he said a lot of people grew up not knowing how to pronounce his name. I'm sure he corrected them. People just couldn't, however, manage to get it right. Even though you have people out here saying Schwarzenegger and Krzyzewski and Saoirse and Shaban with no problem at all. Somehow Chibueze was too much of a mouthful, was too difficult, even though Collins was right there. Because it's not like Chibueze is his first name, it's his last name. Collins was right there. It was right there. But Chibueze was so hard. So they called him Shaboozey, and he rolled with it, and he took it as his stage name. Cool. The reason why it is problematic is because that is a microaggression. A microaggression is defined as a statement, action, or incident regarded as an instance of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group, such as a racial or ethnic minority. It can also be defined as indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group. So here's the thing. Microaggressions don't have to necessarily be intentional. And when I talked about it being a microaggression on my TikTok, a lot of people are like, oh my God, they just seemed very annoyed by the fact that does everything have to be racism? A lot of things can be tied back to racism. It's not all tied back to racism, but this falls under the umbrella of racism. A microaggression, it doesn't have to be intentional. It can be subtle, it can be indirect, it can be unintentional. People struggling to say his name is not a microaggression. There are some names that are more challenging. They're not gonna roll off the tongue. It's gonna take a little bit of work. That is understandable. That in and of itself is not a microaggression. But when someone is constantly repeating their name to you, or this is somebody you work with or is a friend, and they are of an ethnic minority, an ethnic or racial minority, and you are consistently saying their name wrong or trying to shorten their name or give them a nickname or butchering it on purpose, because after the first 3 or 4 times, it is now something you are doing intentionally, especially after he or she has corrected you and you are still saying it wrong. That is a microaggression, and that is intentional at this point. It is also very disheartening because earlier in this video, I named off 4 names that are challenging names, but they are common names in our society. These are also challenging names, but because they are associated with people who are not of an ethnic minority or people deemed of importance, people will memorize them and get it right. And the fact that they were his friends who were constantly butchering his name, his friends, his teachers, people in his community, butchered his name so badly that he was just like, you know what, you can call me this thing. He stopped correcting them, but not only did he stop correcting them, he went on to take it as a stage name. That is what I find very curious, and I would love to just kind of pick his brain about why he went with something like this, because there is a lot behind a name. Like, I think a lot of people are like, oh, it's just a stage name, but there is power behind a name. And this is not just a Nigerian thing. There are a lot of other cultures that when they give you a name, when your parents give you a name, it is your legacy. It is a show of your ethnicity. It is a show of your culture. It is a show of your roots and your history, where you come from. There is so much power in your name that for somebody to take a name like God is King and allow people to butcher it and then have it become your stage name is just very curious to me. What makes this so much more interesting to me is, like I said, this is his last name. Collins was right there. So how are your peers getting your name wrong so often, but it's not even your first name, it is your last name. So they are choosing to butcher your last name, go out of their way to say your last name and say it incorrectly to the point where you stop correcting them and you make it a stage name. Like, that's just very curious to me. And earlier I brought up a few names, Schwarzenegger, Krzyzewski, Saoirse, and Shaban, that are challenging and difficult names, but because they are names of people in our society, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mike Krzyzewski. They are names of people who are important, and they are names of white people that people are going to take the time to get it right. Because I personally notice when it is people of a European background, people are not going to try to nickname them. Like, yes, there are people who call Coach Krzyzewski or Mike Krzyzewski, they call him Coach K, but everybody, commentators, I have never heard a sports analyst or commentator say that man's name wrong. Never in my years of watching college ball, I've never heard anybody say his name wrong. So there are people who are going to take the time to learn your name and get it right if they deem you important or valuable enough, or somebody who is of worth and who is of value, who is of stature and importance. They're going to learn how to say your name right. And I think it's just very unfortunate that people, his friends, his teachers, the people in his community couldn't get his name right. And maybe he didn't have enough, he just didn't have enough sense of self, or maybe regarded his name as powerful enough to correct them, or just thought, oh, this is just a silly stage name and I can take it as something that will make me stand out. Because Shaboozey, it's something that's interesting. When you hear it, you're like, I wonder what that is. And so it is a name, it is a stage name that absolutely stands out. And I wouldn't have batted an eye if I didn't know the origin of the stage name, but knowing the reason behind the stage name, I'm like, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that. Now, here's the thing. While I may not like it, I really do understand, as a first generation kid, as someone who does have immigrant parents, and the vast majority of my friends growing up were also children of immigrants, I understand that need and that desire to assimilate. We are existing in a time now where people display pride in their cultural and ethnic identity. We have hakas everywhere. Like, it's so cool. We have different types of movies. We have Black Panther. We have so many depictions of different cultures and ethnicities in TV and film and Disney movies that we didn't have growing up. We have so much more representation now, and it's so beautiful to see. But as somebody who came up in the 90s and the 2000s, I distinctly remember being called an African booty scratcher. I distinctly remember people telling me to go back to Africa, or asking me if I eat baboons, and just this general ignorance. If my parents, like, they grew up in huts, when I went to Nigeria, oh my God, did you see lions and tigers? Like, what? The 90s and the 2000s, if you were different in any type of way, it was very hostile for you, depending on the community you grew up in. And even though I grew up in a very racially diverse area with other children of immigrants, it was still really challenging. And a lot of kids, even adults, there are people who just, assimilation is a lot easier. You don't want to stand out. You don't want anything that's going to make you different. You want to flatten yourself. And that's what so many immigrants did coming into America. So many, that first wave of immigration in this country, people coming into Staten Island, they're Americanizing their name. They're changing their names. It's something that assimilation is survival in so many aspects in this country. And when you are especially a kid growing up in school, you don't want to be different, because that's something, you want one less thing that's going to get you bullied or made fun of. You don't want to be a target. There was somebody who was arguing with me in my comments. She was like, oh, you don't understand because you don't have a name, that you had never been the topic of conversation because of your name. And it's like, excuse me, my first name may be American. Well, actually, Sasha is Russian. I may have an English name or an American name or a non-Nigerian, non-African name that is easy to pronounce and is not going to really confuse people. So that's not going to make me a target of anybody's like bullying or teasing. But when it came to my maiden name, when it came to my last name, absolutely. It's so funny. I would just see teachers look at the roster and I'd be like, Sasha, here, don't even try to say my last name. And I would pronounce it for them and then have them say it back to me. And I would say it and get them right. Because one thing I never did, I never allowed anybody to like mess up my last name. You're going to get it right. You're going to say it with me. And I had so many people call me Algebra, Agobi, everything that they could butcher my name in so many ways. And I never allowed anybody to do so. I never allowed anybody to shorten it. I never allowed anybody to nickname me. So somebody was like, oh, well, you don't understand because you were never the topic of conversation because your first name is not Nigerian. And yes, my first name is not Nigerian, but I was absolutely the topic of conversation. And I was absolutely the subject of bullying because of my last name. And so when somebody said that in my comments, she was like, oh, you don't understand where Shaboozey is coming from. I'm like, Shaboozey's first name is not Nigerian. Like me, he has an American, a European first name. So again, what are we talking about here? You know, I think like some people, also what like makes conversations really frustrating on TikTok is because some people really just roll up to your videos ready to argue. They don't listen to it. They don't listen to understand. They listen to respond, and they just be ready to tussle. And I'm like, relax. But anyways, yeah, so I understand what it is like to want to make yourself less of a target of any type of bullying, and we are celebrating culture. We are celebrating cultural and ethnic diversity. Like, never did I think we would be celebrating Diwali. I never thought we would see Diwali in a calendar. Never thought we would see that, but here we are. You know, we are at a place where we are actively celebrating diversity, equity, inclusion, representation, culture. We recognize that diversity is our strength, but that is something that is very new. That is something I would say is very recent to the past 10 or 15 years, like especially when Black Panther came out. I'm like, oh, all of a sudden everybody's in a showbiz now and everybody's excited to, you know, they're doing their 23andMe. I ran into somebody that was like, I went to the Black Panther premiere and somebody was like, hey cousin, you know, I did my DNA test and I found out I'm Yoruba. And I'm like, okay, me too. Like, I mean, listen, I'm Yoruba anyway, like my dad's Yoruba, my mom's Igbo, so like, yes, but I'm like, you know, cool, okay, cousin. You know, there's this sense of wanting to get back to your identity and to your cultural and ethnic heritage and wanting to know what it is. That's a very new thing. That's very recent. I distinctly remember coming up in a time where just to be different was something that was made fun of. It was teased. It was not to be celebrated. So I don't want to do too much on Shaboozey because I do understand what it is like to be different and not want to make yourself a source of or a target of bullying. However, I also grew up where my parents were so intentional about getting it right. You know, if they say your name wrong, make them get it right. But I understand that it was a little bit easier for me because it was my last name, not necessarily my first name. So kids who it is their first name, I understand that they may want to take on nickname, but your nickname shouldn't be a result of somebody's microaggression. And if you want them to call you by your full name, don't let them shorten it, because somebody was like, I'm sure that this was a nickname he was given from people. And I was like, no, that nickname, that his stage name is a microaggression. But if your name, for example, is Olufumilola and one of your family members or your family calls you either Olu, Fumi, or Lola, that is a nickname that you can decide to take on. But if you want somebody, especially at school or your work, if you want somebody to call you by your entire name, you have the right to ask people to honor that. You know, there's always this desire to nickname and shorten people's names. Like, it's one of those things where people, you know, your family, your friends, people who are really close to you can give you a nickname, but nobody else should be able to force a nickname upon you that you don't want just because it is easier for them or your name is too hard. If it is somebody that you respect, you will learn their name. It will not be too hard because that's the least you could do. You can be respectful. And if you can learn how to say the name Kaylee, you can learn how to say the name Olufumilola. You know, there is this perception of people just look at a name and because it doesn't look familiar to their eyes, oh, it's hard. But it's just like, take the time to learn it and to get it right. That is the least you could do for people, especially people you call yourself their friends. And in all honesty, if you did this in a work environment, if you insisted upon shortening somebody's name or giving them a nickname or consistently saying their name wrong, that is a microaggression. And if somebody takes that to HR at your office, you can be fired. That is a fireable offense, or at the very least is considered harassment. Just something to think about. Watching people clown him and make fun of him for being snubbed, it just seemed really disproportionate. And as I started to just look at people's comments, I started to see like very similar threads outside of the Diaspora wars, because the reaction that he gets from people is very similar to me to the reaction people have for Cynthia Erivo. And I personally love Cynthia Erivo. And again, this may be my bias because A, I'm rooting for everybody Black, but also she is Nigerian. So I'm rooting for all my Nigerians out there across the diaspora. But there was somebody saying like, somebody asked me, oh, this is a comment that made me laugh. Somebody was like, why do you care? He doesn't date Black women. And I'm like, I don't what does that have anything to do with people butchering his name and his stage name and it being a microaggression? I don't care if he doesn't date Black women. Like, my husband is white. So if I was to have any issue with the fact that he dates white women or his girlfriend is white or whatever, I would be a hypocrite because my husband is white. But on top of that, I've never seen him say anything negative about Black women. I got another comment from somebody that was like, oh, well, why do you care? You know, Black women, we're resting. We don't care. And we're resting over the next 4 years. And I want to be like very clear to people that you can talk about something and not necessarily be putting on your cape and ready to swoop in and get on the front lines and battle for anybody. You know, I can have this conversation and I don't think it's necessary for people to be clowning Shaboozey, but I'm not gonna sit there and put on a cape for him and go to battle for people. I'm gonna post my little video and go. I'm gonna post my video about things that I find interesting. And I think people really need to understand that Black women talking about something or choosing to talk about a topic of conversation doesn't mean we're not resting, doesn't mean we're ready to put on a cape and swoop in for war and battle and to be everybody's mammy, like social justice mammy. Like, no, I talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and representation. I talk about social commentary. He is Nigerian. He's Nigerian American. He's from the DMV. Like, there are a lot of things about him that I find interesting. So I want to talk about this, and whether he dates white women or not, I don't really care about that. I've never seen him say anything negative about Black women, and if he has, I will eat my freaking best. But as for now, this is just something that I find very interesting, and as a first-generation Nigerian American, I want to talk about it. I do know that there is some controversy about him not putting Black women in his music videos. I think that probably has something to do with the genre of music he's making. Honestly, I don't really listen to country music. I don't care for it too much one way or the other. Like, if it's on, I'll listen to it, but I'm never gonna be like, yo, cut on that Morgan Wallen song. Like, also, he's problematic in and of himself. So yeah, I'm never gonna be like, put on that Luke Bryan or Zach Bryan or Brian Luke. I don't know. There's a lot of Lukes and Bryans and Zachs. They be confusing me. So all of this to say, you know, I'm not watching his music videos. So if he's not putting Black women in his videos, yeah, I can understand how that is problematic, but I also understand that he is in a genre that is not necessarily appealing to us. And yes, it is, country music is a Black genre. It was originated and created by Black people, and it was appropriated and stolen by white folks. And yeah, I get that. I get that. At the same time, am I upset that Black women are not twerking in Shaboozey's videos? Absolutely not. I don't think that's the kind of representation we need, and I've seen enough twerking to last me a lifetime in music videos. I'm good. I'm good. I don't need to see it. I also think in part that's probably why they snubbed him, because the country music scene was absolutely happy to take his contributions and have him kind of put a spotlight on pop country again, like pop, hip hop, fusion kind of country music again. They were really happy to have him in that space benefit the genre, but they were not going to give him his ones. They were not going to give him his flowers. It's the same way they treated Lil Nas X, and that's why I like that. What was his name? That one dude that told Beyonce, oh, you can't just drop a country album. Come and hang out with us for a while. You know, be in the genre. You know, basically wanted Beyonce to kiss ass and schmooze to them and, you know, kiss the ring. And when Beyonce didn't do that, they were like, oh, and then they snubbed Cowboy Carter too. But I'm glad Beyonce don't got to come to Nashville and schmooze nobody. She didn't got to kiss no ring. Beyonce is Beyonce. She is the top performing. She is the best pop star of this generation, of this current time. And you think she gonna come down and kiss your booty for a genre that was created by us, for us? That was cute. I'm glad Beyonce was like immediately no. And I think Shaboozey also like boosting her and praising her so much, because Beyonce really did a lot for Shaboozey. Like, she putting him and giving him that platform really put him on. And I really think that the country music scene also snubbed him to send Beyonce a message, if that makes sense. Like, they were like, oh, you're gonna praise Beyonce? Watch what we do. No CMAs for you, Shaboozey, but he don't need the no CMA award. Shaboozey's already done his big one, and I really wish and pray and hope that he continues to have a really fruitful career. And you know, him being snubbed like that, a lot of people took it as an opportunity to, again, make fun of him. And it's really disheartening, because not only did they take it as an opportunity to make fun of him, but also took it as an opportunity to reignite the diaspora wars. When it comes to the diaspora wars, I honestly think we see the most vitriol against Nigerian Americans Americans. And I literally don't know what it is. Like, I don't know what it is about Nigerians, why we get flamed so hard in these diaspora wars. But something that I constantly saw a lot of people saying in a few comment sections is, oh, he thought he was going to go to Nashville and he thought that they were going to treat him differently. And it's like, that is the genre of music he is in. When you are one of and only in any space, I imagine it is really challenging, and you're probably trying to assimilate and you're trying to fit in. And that's what Shaboozey, that's what Lil Nas X was trying to do in the country space. When he dropped Old Town Road, he was trying to fit in that space and used Billy Ray Cyrus to co-sign him. Shaboozey is in a very difficult place because he is in a genre of music that is very prejudiced, that is very discriminatory, that is very racist. And unfortunately, to get any acknowledgement and recognition, you have to schmooze and hobnob with people like that. And you can choose not to, like Beyonce did. But Beyonce is Beyonce. She is at the top of her game. She puts people on. She don't need nobody to co-sign her. She is the co-signer at this point. Shaboozey does not have the same level of clout. He's just now getting started. So if he wants to make himself certified in that space, he has to participate in that space, you know, if he wants to do that genre of music. And I think it's really frustrating that as a Black artist, you are really pigeonholed. You know, Frank Ocean has talked about this before. Tyler, the Creator, has talked about this before. SZA has talked about this before. Just because you are a Black person making music does not mean you are automatically R&B or hip hop or even pop. You know, there's so much space for Black artists in so many different genres, but they get pigeonholed into R&B or into hip hop or rap, even though that's not the kind of music they're making, but it's how they categorize Black artists, and it really sucks. So I don't think Shaboozey going into the country music genre and making country music and him being snubbed, the fact that anybody would be like, you thought you were better than us, you thought you were gonna go into that space and get accepted, I think that's really crazy. I think that's unfair. And it almost seems to me like if he was a Nigerian, he probably wouldn't have gotten flamed the way he did. You have other Black artists that are doing country music, you know, Mickey Guyton, Tanner Adele, what is her name? I cannot think about her. K. Michelle, you know, they are doing country music and they are getting snubbed, but I don't see people giving them as much of a side eye or making fun of them the way people came for Shaboozey. And I don't think it's exclusively because of his name. I think I think some of it is honestly about the fact that he is Nigerian, that he is of the diaspora, that he is a first-generation Nigerian American, a child of immigrants, and there is a lot of xenophobia around first-generation children of immigrants, like especially, and I'm not, let me be careful with what I say because I don't need anybody in the comments saying I'm trying to flame any diaspora wars, so I'm going to choose my words very carefully. There is an increased level of xenophobia that I've been seeing, anti-Black immigrant sentiment xenophobia. Earlier this year was the Haitians are eating the cats, and everybody thought that was hilarious. And I'm like, are we not clocking the fact that this is very anti-Black, that this is very anti-Black immigrant sentiment? Like, this is not funny. This is not something we are laughing about. But because it's Black immigrants, that's just fuel for the diaspora war. Like I said earlier, I'm rooting for everybody Black. Before people are going to discriminate against you or be racist towards you or be prejudiced towards you, they're not going to ask if you are a child of immigrants, if you are an immigrant yourself. So we are infighting some people, because some people are choosing to create the diaspora wars, participate in them, add fuel to that fire without realizing that at the end of the day, they're all looking at us the same. And the real issue is white supremacy. We shouldn't be fighting amongst one another. Like, yes, I recognize all skin folk ain't kinfolk, but I've never seen Shaboozey say anything anti-Black. I've never seen him say anything negative about African Americans or Black Americans. I've never seen him say anything. So the fact that he gets so much hate is like very weird to me. And I really don't understand the pandering allegations, because who is he pandering to? Like, he is in the country music space. The country music space is a genre that is mostly listened to by white Americans. And so if that is his primary audience and the demographic he is trying to reach, then it makes sense to me that he would have a lot of white women in his music videos. Do I think he could absolutely put Black women in his music videos? Absolutely. But I'm also very mindful of how Black women are represented, and I don't want to see Black women depicted in any type of way that would create stereotypes of our images or lend to pre-existing stereotypes and make us look bad. And a lot of people really struggle. There are very few artists that get it right. And so I would much rather not see it at all. As a dark-skinned Black woman who came of age in the late 90s and early 2000s, I distinctly remember watching music videos and seeing people who looked like me. They were always degraded and not exemplified. You know, they weren't the main girl. They weren't the beautiful girl. Like, I think I remember Lloyd's You music video. D Woods was in there. I loved that music video because she's like, you know, a little bit lighter than me, and she was the main girl and she wasn't degraded. Like, she was beautiful. Like, Lloyd was singing to her, he was serenading her, and that's one of the very rare times that you see an unambiguously Black woman being depicted in a music video where she is the star, where she is the eye candy, against like BET Uncut, BET After Dark, Nelly's Tip Drill. That, like, no, like immediately no. I would much rather not see us at all than see us and be depicted a certain way. But yeah, the hate that is sent to actors and actresses of the diaspora, especially first generation Nigerians, it is really disproportionate and it is really wild to see. And I really don't understand where it comes from. Like, I know Nigerians are very proud. We are a very boastful people. You can't tell us nothing. Like, Niger, no, they carry last. We are such a boastful people. And just thinking about the hate a lot of us get, it is really unfortunate to me. And not just Nigerians, but a lot of, now that I'm thinking about it, just a lot of Africans especially. Like, I remember just earlier this year, people were flaming Issa Rae. They were like pitting her against Amanda Seales, who was an elite trying to kiss up to corporate entities. Amanda Seales, who was also a first generation child of immigrants. Her mother is from Grenada. Issa Rae, another first generation child of Black immigrants. Then you have Cynthia Erivo, even though she's not American, she is British. You have Lovey and John Boyega. So there's just so much like anti-Black immigrant, you know, first generation hate that's fueling these diaspora wars. And with Cynthia Erivo, I saw her tweets. I understand how people feel that way. I understand why people feel the way they do about her. Not taking that away from anybody, period. There is, however, a lot that's been occurring on both sides. One group is not any more at fault than another group. I am just hoping that we can once and for all put it to the side. Because like I have said at least 3 times in this video, when people see us, when people see me, I am an unambiguously Black woman. When people see me and they're going to be prejudiced against me, they're going to be racist against me, they're going to discriminate against me, they're not going to pause to stop and ask me if I'm Nigerian American, if my parents are immigrants, if I was born here. They're not going to ask me that. Our cultures may be different. How we got to this country by means of may be different. Whether we're children of Jamaican immigrants, Haitian immigrants, Nigerian immigrants, South African immigrants, Zimbabwean immigrants, you know, we are all sharing a commonality, a common thread. And while I understand all skin folk ain't kinfolk, the real enemy, what we are all battling against and fighting against, is white supremacy. That is the real enemy. And I think these diaspora wars are a really great way, and not even just the diaspora wars, but also communities of color, people of color fighting amongst us. It is a great way. It is a common tool for agents of white supremacy triangulating us against the other, so we are stuck fighting amongst each other instead of looking at the real enemy and tackling the real issue. And I think over the next 4 years, that's really what we need to be mindful of, because when we get bogged down by these like silly diaspora wars and infighting amongst another, that is time and energy that is being wasted, that is being taken away from focusing on the real issue. To wrap this up, because I kind of got on a tangent and I said I didn't want to do too much on the diaspora wars, but I do think how Shaboozey is being received, how him being snubbed, I do think how it is being received and discussed absolutely has something to do with the diaspora wars. But I just thought it was very interesting because of the creator I saw talk about his name and how just him talking about the name Shaboozey, instead of people to like that be the main focus and topic of conversation, it somehow became fuel for fodder when it came to the diaspora wars. And I'm like, really? Because microaggressions are right there. Like microaggressions are right there. Like, can we talk about it? Like, why are we doing the lazy thing? Why are we doing the lazy thing? Let's talk about how people constantly butchering his name is absolutely an anti-Black microaggression. And it's not just anti-Black. This is what people do to a lot of immigrants of color. They do not take the time. They do not take the care. They do not take the energy to get our names right in a way that they do with their white counterparts, with their white European counterparts, because there are a lot of Irish names, there are a lot of German names, there are a lot of Scottish names, there are a lot of other white European names that are very challenging to pronounce. Bjorn? What is that? Like Bjorn? That is challenging to pronounce. Just looking at it, you might be like, oh, I don't know about all of that. But people take the time and the energy to get names right. And from my personal experience, I have seen people put the time and care and energy into getting hard names right when it is a European name in a way that they don't take the time and energy to do that with Asian names, Southeast Asian names, African names, Latino names. They don't give the same energy. They don't put in the same care. It's always jumping to a nickname or it's jumping to shorten your name. And it's like, no, ask them how to say their name, continue to say it until you get it right. And if they themselves don't want to consistently correct you and tell you, oh, just call me this, by all means, just call them that. But until and unless they tell you that, put some respect on people's names. Just because you don't have any cultural pride in your name, or it's not attached, you're not really attached to it, it doesn't really mean anything to you. There are communities in which your name is your birthright. It is your legacy. It is the most important thing that can be bestowed upon you. And people have put in time and energy and thought into naming that person what they did. And at the very least, your name is your legacy. And if people can learn how to say Tchaikovsky, you can learn how to say Shaboozey. Put some respect on people's names, okay? That's it. That's all. Drop down in the comments, let me know, are you a first generation child of immigrants and your parents gave you a hard to pronounce name, or did they give you like an easy name, an American name, or a given name? I know some people who have Nigerian first names, but then they have European middle names and they go by their middle names. And like I said, that's absolutely their prerogative. But if somebody wants you to call them by their given name of their cultural and ethnic heritage, then that's exactly what you are gonna call them. But drop down in the comments and let me know if you are a first generation child of immigrants and you've experienced this before. Well, let me know what you think about the diaspora wars. And are the diaspora wars only something that happen within like the Black community? Like, are diaspora wars, do they happen within the Latino community or the Asian community, the Southeast Asian community, the Polynesian community? Like, I want to know, because I guess I'm like, obviously because I'm Black, I'm more tuned in into what is happening within Black American cultures, within African cultures. Like, I'm more in tune and connected to that. So I don't really be knowing. But let me know if the diaspora wars is not something that is only occurring within like, you know, the Black American and then the Black African and Caribbean, the diaspora. Like, drop it in the comments and let me know, because I'm very interested about that. And just because I'm not aware of it doesn't mean it's not happening, because you don't know what you don't know. And when you know better, you do better. But in this case, I'm just curious. So drop down in the comments and let me know. In the meantime, do not forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, peace out. Also, P.S. shout out to my makeup. I put this on 11 hours ago and she could use a touch up, but we're still holding on. Okay, let me get out of here. Bye, y'all.